Good afternoon. I see the lights. Welcome to the Optimizing Operations panel that consists of our three panelists. We have John Jacobs, Senior Vice President of Operations, Dale Johnson, Vice President and Plant Manager of Dakota Gas Company, and Gavin McCollum, Vice President of Engineering and Construction. I'm going to ask some questions of them and they'll respond to them to get started. Then later in the program, we'll open it up to questions from the floor. There's mics at different places, or raising our hand will get you a mic. So that's kind of the process we'll do, and I'm going to start out with safety. I know safety's #1 priority. We've heard that over and seen the results of that over the years. Recently, Leland Olds received quite a prestigious award. Would you like to discuss that and share that with us, John?
I sure would. Just like we start out anything else, safety in operations is our priority. And I'm extremely proud of all of our employees that run our facilities. In particular, in this particular case, is the Leland Olds Station was awarded the Lignite Energy Safety Excellence Award, which has been in place for the last 25 years. And it goes to the facility that burns lignite coal or mines lignite coal. In this particular case, and this year was co-shared with the Coyote Creek North American mine that provides coal to the Coyote Station. But Leland Olds has been stellar in their safety, as all of our employees had. A little history of the award: it's been in place for 25 years. As a testament to our safety and our safety culture is that our Antelope Valley Station has held that award for 3 times, and as we get a little local competition going, our Leland Olds Station has had it for 4 times. So very proud of that record and what our employees are able to do on the safety front.
Well, congratulations, you should be proud of that. Dale, how about safety at Dakota Gas?
As I told John earlier, I'm a little jealous of Lee Olds and the Lignite Louis. I'd like to have that on my shelf too. But seriously, you know, it's a challenging environment. There's a lot of work going on. It takes a lot of effort to keep the safety there and keep the focus and pay attention to safety. At DGC, we had a couple, I think, significant milestones this year. The first, in April of this year, we achieved 1 million man-hours without a lost time injury. That takes us almost a year to achieve, so that I felt really good about that. And another significant milestone was during our June outage. Turnarounds are a huge effort. It's a lot of people, a lot of hours, you know, and there's a fatigue factor there. And we had the best safety record compared to the previous 3 years. Not only for DGC, but for our contractors as well. So I think it shows that we have a commitment to protecting ourselves, as well as those people that are coming into our environment and helping us out.
Nice job. Gavin, you guys are on the road a lot with the construction and engineering part of it. How'd safety go with you guys?
We did really well, Doug. First of all, not just E&C, engineering construction, but all of headquarters recently achieved 3 million man-hours without a lost time accident. So the whole building is pretty proud of that award. And you might ask yourself, we're office folks, and you know what's the risk in that? I think most of the safety professionals would tell you that slips, trips, and falls are probably one of the most common areas where people get hurt. So it can be as simple as walking out to your car or back on a slippery pavement. So that's a risk that we have avoided for the past 3 million man-hours. But one of the biggest risks that we face is driving, like you mentioned. The projects that we work on are typically at an operating facility or the transmission facility or perhaps a new project, and those are all remotely located. You know, they're not close to the Bismarck office, so we spend a lot of windshield time, a lot of driving time, and thankfully and happily we've been able to do that for the past several years without any accidents. On the project side, we work really closely with procurement whenever we're awarding a construction contract, that we make sure that the contractors that we're considering have good safety records. We talk about their safety culture before we even award a construction contract, so we make sure that that's paramount. The other thing that we like to do, and I'd do that right now here, is anytime we're starting a meeting, whether it's a project meeting or a department meeting, we try to talk about something safety related that's topical. And what I might bring forth today is that a reminder to everyone who's deer hunting this weekend. I know the North Dakota rifle season opens. I think other states have opened also. You're out there, you're going to be driving county roads, gravel roads. Be careful when you're coming up to a hill. Slow down, move to the right. You never know if there's a car coming on the other side. You'll be out walking around in the field. Watch your footing. Bring water with you. I know it's going to be cold, but you still want to make sure you're hydrated. Most importantly, practice good firearm safety. Make sure your shells are removed from your rifle before you get in the pickup. Make sure you know what you're aiming at, know what's behind what you're aiming at. It seems like every year around this season we read about something bad happening in the paper. So let's all be mindful of that and try to make sure that nothing like that happens to us or our families.
Well, thank you. It's good to hear the good news as far as how the safety's been going. I think everybody in this room is concerned that all the base employees are able to go home safely each and every night, and thanks for that focus. Along with the safety, you had some pretty good news on the generating performance this year. Want to share some of that with us, John?
Yeah, I sure can. I guess I'd sum it up as dynamic, if nothing else. As the years go along and we're into a market, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along, I can't point to any specific record other than our plants, whether it was coal or our gas or our wind, all performed very well. And those that didn't have outages were in that 90 or upper 90% availability, which is great. And always doing it safely is a great thing. But we're shifting on how our facilities are run with the market, and with less people that we've got than we've worked with before because of the reduction in force. It's been dynamic. I mean, we've had to do things that we didn't before with the gas portfolio running differently, our coal plants running differently. So I'll just leave it at that. It's been an interesting year.
We'll probably circle back to a few more details of how that went, but Dale, how about at the Gasification Plant? How's things gone there?
So I think I'll steal the dynamic word from John. I think one of the biggest accomplishments for me that I saw, that not so much this year but last year, for 2018, we had the highest capacity factor that we've ever seen in the life of the plant. And at 95%, and we look at that relative to 170 million standard cubic feet of SNG capacity, 95% is incredibly impressive, especially when you consider that the plant was designed to operate around in the low 80 percentiles. So our reliability efforts have really gone a long ways, and last year we saw the fruits of that labor.
Thank you. How about on the Urea plant? We have a year and a half worth of operation from the start to now. I'm sure we've learned a lot, and can you share a little bit of how that's going?
Yeah, so we hit our 1-year anniversary in January of this year of the Urea operation, and I think first and foremost that the unit has run well. That right from the get-go, we were able to achieve high rates with the unit, and it really has run quite well. That being said, there's always adjustments. It's new to our people, so it's a learning thing, and we're constantly improving. And we're learning more about the market. And one example of that is late last year, we added the capability of shipping 50% diesel exhaust fluid along with the 32.5%, which was the original design. And so what that's done for us is that's opened up the markets, and you'll hear a little bit more from the marketing guys later. But now not only we shipping material or the DEF to a local market that's growing, but we're moving a DEF all the way to the West Coast. So that was fascinating to see that it made sense to go that far, and still good margins out that far. Overall in Urea, since inception, we've made over 440,000 tons of Urea, and an equivalent of 30,000 additional tons as diesel exhaust fluid.
Great. When you talked about the fertilizer and stuff, I guess one thing that happened in October was a lot of maintenance work on the plant. Can you just give us the highlights of that?
Sure. You know, the words that really struck me, I was talking to one of our long-term supervisors in the ammonia plant just last week, and he said that it was by far the most extensive turnaround that he had ever seen in his career at the plant. So no stone unturned, so to speak. And so in the ammonia plant, our goal there is to get ourselves to where we can go to a 2-year turnaround cycle. Historically, it's been 1 year, and if we go way back, we were down pretty routinely because that's where the market was. On the urea side, of course, when you take ammonia down, you have to take urea down as well. On the urea side, this was our first opportunity to look inside these new vessels, all this new equipment, and really check everything out. And you know, while that unit has run really well, you know, we really wanted to make sure that there was no undue wear and tear. And we had the licensor on site, and so the experts came out on site, took a look through everything, and said that, you know, it was right where they would expect. So that was really good to hear. And one of the biggest jobs that we did in the urea plant, or in the ammonia plant, excuse me, was the replacement of one of our steam turbines. That was an older 60s vintage machine. It came from Fort Madison with the rest of the plant, and that machine had become very unreliable over the years. You know, several breakdowns over the years, and you know, so we got a new machine that's going to be far superior in design, but far more efficient as well. You know, 30-40% more efficient than that old machine. So I'm really enthused to see what the steam balance is going to look like going forward.
We'll be excited to see too. Thank you very much. John, I believe you've had 5 plants that you had maintenance outages on this year. I've got a twofold question related to that, but would you like to address how it went on those maintenance outages first?
Yeah, no year goes without a major outage. I mean, that's just the business we're in. And the major outages you schedule when it's appropriate to get them done so that they're available at the high peak of your summer and winter loads. And the more you can do during those scheduled outages, the better the life is for not only the member at the end of the line, but the power plant worker. You know, he's been successful in getting that done. As you mentioned, we had 5 major outages this year, 3 of them in the spring. We had an AVS2 outage that went really, really well. We had an outage on LRS1. The bulk of that, and Gavin will get into that, had to do with installing a brand new SCR, a selective catalytic reduction, a new bell and whistle to make it environmentally compliant to all the currently existing environmental regs. That went very well. We also had a spring outage on our dry fork station. And that was kind of a monumental task as well, or memorable, in that I always give Tom Stallcup a bad time about it. He's still got the plant with the new car smell. This was the first major outage on that where we had the total turbine generator tore down. You always go into these expecting that you're going to find something, otherwise you would not tear them down just to look, but to make sure that you've got a good, reliable run. The only major significant item that we ran into was with the HPIP. We had a casing that deformed somewhat. We're able to fit that into the schedule and got that work done. And then we're moving on. We currently have LRS2 this fall. Currently an outage is expected to come out of that outage within the next couple of weeks. And with acronyms, moving on to the 5th one, we had a DCS at the DCS, which is our Deer Creek station. It was combined cycle. In South Dakota, we were upgrading the distributive control system on that unit, and that all went well and returned. So all in all, I'd say for the majority, other than we ran substantially longer on our Laramie River Station, that was kind of expected with the work that we had to include. We changed out 2 major ID fans, incorporating the rest of the work. All those outages, for the most part, came in on time and under budget. We're also on some other minor, smaller outages, we're able to incorporate ports for LRS Unit 2 and 3 for their SNCRs, selective non-reduction and catalytic reduction, and those went well as the others did. So really proud of our folks, a lot of long hours. I think from our Laramie River Station employees, they wouldn't know what it is to be without working an outage with all the environmental changes we've had. So a lot of long hours, working safe, and I appreciate their efforts.
Thank you very much. Tied to that question, the next one has to do with, there's been so many changes with all the renewables in the market, with SPP, volatility, that set of blocks of power having to determine when we run and how much. How has it worked from you guys? I mean, people love change. Every employee, I'm sure, just says, can we change how we're doing things? How's that gone with all the changes that you've done this year, and how have you worked with marketing to try to make things work best?
All in all, I think we've adapted well. The market has changed where not only are we competing with others, not just to put power out for our own consumers, but all consumers when it comes to that. So we have to look at our portfolio, as Paul talked about this morning, the all-above strategy, how we do things. One really a big change when it comes into planning a major outage and the work you do was we're finding out more and more the gas assets that we're running, which were intended to be peakers. They're not peakers anymore. They're, because of the low gas, they're running pretty much base load. So we've seen a shift there with the gas and the wind where it's competing, especially in the shoulder months, in the spring and the fall, with our coal fleet. And coal fleet wasn't intended to cycle up and down. So we're contending with some of those issues. To talk about our gas fleet and scheduling that type of work for outage has become more difficult because the beginning of the year we get our generation for the entire year for our fleet. And one thing different from a gas plant versus a coal facility is that they are totally based on doing maintenance on the number of starts you have on the unit and the hours you run. And to tell you how close we were to that generation is that from our coal gas fleet portfolio, the expected generation for the entire year we consumed by mid-May. So when you're trying to schedule an outage based on hours run, start stops, puts a whole new shift on getting people engaged to say, okay, something that I had in the budget forecasted for 2020 or 2021, you have to rethink. And there's new rules in place that you cannot schedule an outage for that type of work from June 15th to September 15th. So now you're constrained in a window, most of the time competing with another workforce to come in. But on the other side of that, for our coal fleet, we've been able to take a look at having the difference between our coal fleet is based on a 3-year run. And we're mandated to do that in North Dakota by state law. You can't run a coal plant longer than 3 years without having an outside entity come in and inspect the facility. Is it capable of running? Has it been well maintained? And you get an operating permit for the next 3 years. That doesn't exist in Wyoming. We have a little bit more leeway on what we do there, but best practice has been, and maybe the SPP and the market we're in may change that paradigm because the last 5-6 years, if I was looking at the meter when I came in, I wanted to see our entire fleet, whether it was gas, wind, or coal, generating at max output. And now you see the fluctuations, and where we run into the issue, as I said, with our coal fleet is when you get into the after peak hours, and you can't start and stop a coal plant like you can a gas plant or a gas turbine. So we are finding, or working with our marketing folks real close on the necessity at times of doing those type of things, because it makes sense to make sure we're getting the money in the market to do those outages, but also make sure that have money covered for we know we've got maintenance coming, but we want to do the right things for the member at the end of the day.
Thank you. Gavin, I feel bad I haven't had a question for you for a bit, but I have one more for John before we come back to you, if I may. I understand you have a new tenant at the Integrated Test Center. Can you enlighten us with what might be going on?
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. I think this is, we talked about Tundra a little bit this morning, but for Wyoming plant at our Dry Fork station, for the past 2 years we've been in construction mode, and the state of Wyoming wanted to put a test center at their cost. We basically gave them a $0 lease for the ability to do some testing and the potential of actually resolving the CO2 issue. That's what I'm excited to see. The first tenant is a company called TDA. They're kind of an intern. We put a 6th gas stream pipe out for TDA to test on, and typically they've been in the market for a while, and their full function is doing testing on amines to upgrade to do the process better, much like the Tundra and Boundary Water Dam is using. The other portion of the test center is the small test center, which the first tenants come from a competition called X Prize. And the way Governor Meade at the time saw the test center and these 5 test centers is not something to not only capture CO2, but is make a product out of it that is sellable, marketable versus something that you're going to capture, not a waste stream to look at sequester or enhanced oil recovery. So Paul had mentioned it looks like potentially yet this year, but for sure the first quarter of 20, we'll have 5 tenants there, anything from making fuels to cement, hardener products. It'll be exciting to see. The other one that I'm really excited about will be on the large test center. We have a company called MTR, and their background is they've done some testing on this at a smaller scale. This will be a step up from what they've done. They have received a federal grant for $30 million to come and test at the Dry Fork station, and it's a membrane system where they'll take flue gas from the Dry Fork station, and the only parasitic load are some compressors and fans that will take the flue gas through the membrane. Their process, don't know a lot of the detail yet, but actually removes water and the CO2. The water, which was good for the Dry Fork station, since it's dry-cooled condenser, is a good thing to be able to bring water back to the plant. Not a whole lot of, that we know of, other type of bad chemicals that we'll have to worry about. But as an offshoot of that, the test skid they'll bring in, they're going to remove 200 tons per day. They, as part of another grant with the federal government, have additional money to do a feed study that would be applicable to the Dry Fork station. And we're hoping as it's successful, in about 2 years, they'll be coming back to us and say, do you want to incorporate that into your plant? So that's kind of a long answer to your short question answer, but we're excited about it.
Well, considering the impact, if we can deal with the carbon issue on that fuel that it can have in our future, especially if fracking gets choked down, it was worth every bit of that update on the test center. Thank you. Well, Gavin, you can see why we kind of waited to talk about the engineering group until you had a chance to be teed up with all the projects that John's mentioned. And you know, share with us a little bit about the projects that you had and some of the changes over the last year and how we're approaching things.
Yeah, sure. We've had a couple major projects that we completed over the past year, both environmental projects. John alluded to the first one. That's the Laramie River Station Selective Catalytic Reduction Project. Jim Lund was our project coordinator for that. And that's an EPA project in line to make the plant comply with their regional haze rules. So basically what that means is you're basically putting a whole new back end on the plant. So you take the flue gas through a new big, huge box, and inside that box is a bunch of catalyst plates. And so that flue gas hits those catalyst plates, and it removes the nitrogen oxide. So that project came in well under it was a $300 million budget, and it came in well under that. It was completed early July, and it's been operating now in compliance, so that's a good thing. Another major environmental project that was completed at the very end of last year and early this year is the Leland Old Station Dry Bottom Ash Project. Chris Bauer was the project coordinator on that project, and that was also an EPA project related to their coal residuals effort. And both of those projects are very complex, not just because they're big, but because they are being executed within an operating facility. And so our project execution team and the engineers work very closely with John's folks to make sure that their design, their maintenance considerations are kept in mind, their operating considerations are kept in mind, and that we're not goofing anything up while they're operating the plant, because most of the time we're putting those projects in while the plant is operating. So it's a team effort between ourselves and John's folks at the plant. And we do have a booth out in the courtyard. Jim Lund and Chris Bauer are there. There's photos of the construction. They can give you some details on the budget. So please stop by and ask them some difficult questions and tell them that I sent you. Regarding our changing role, we talked a little bit about the reduction in force a few times already, and our role has changed accordingly. We've helped out a little more on outages with John's facilities. The outages, as he mentioned, they have hundreds and hundreds of contractors on hand. They're doing dozens and dozens of projects and contracts, and it takes people to coordinate that. And so we've sent folks up to the plant leading up to the outage or during the outage, working night shift at times to help coordinate those efforts. The other thing that we've seen happen in the past year or so is related to Dale and his folks up at DGC. They had the reduction in force kind of changed the way their engineers were organized, and they spread them out into different places, and so they didn't have a lot of project execution design folks left. So we've been able to step up and fill a little bit of that role for Dale and his folks, and that's been a really good exercise and a really good experience so far, so hope to continue that.
That collaboration you talk about that's gone on and the different amount of workforce that we have to work with, is there anything else you had to say on that aspect? I mean, you pretty much covered the fact that you are having people work hand in hand. Is there anything else you want to add to that?
No, that pretty much covers it. We're always, it's always a collaborative effort, team effort between ourselves and whatever operating facility we're working at.
Thank you. John, as you have different entities instead of just a workforce working kind of solo in each plant and stuff, and you've had a lot of changes in workforce too. Can you kind of share with how you've dealt with that?
Yeah, with the reduction in force, we definitely have more people or less people than we had before. It's kind of been a work process of trust and cooperation, let's say it that way, is that we've learned, and I'm very glad that our employees have been working well together. Not that they didn't before, it's a new way of doing things. As I was trying to mention before, it was a lot of our older hands walked out through the reduction in force. You had all that institutional knowledge that left, and I shouldn't have been surprised, because I've seen our workforce step up time and time again, and it ended up in a lot of cases being a very, very good thing, because what I've seen over the course of this is that in the life cycle of people that work through the power plants, whether it's the gas or coal side, you'd be sitting in a job probably for 5 to 10 years. And boy, this had people step up to the plate. It gave new opportunities for employees that probably wouldn't be there. It was a good turnover of ideas. Yeah, there's a lot of times where the ideas were, things that people at my age looked at, well, we already tried that. Well, things have changed, and it's time to try those things again. I mean, it's a good refresher that this workforce has stepped up the way they have, and we have a bright future as far as I'm concerned with the operations group and throughout all of Basin. It's caused us to take reliance on others. We talked about having our procurement folks out in the field, helping when we have an issue with a contractor, not only developing contracts that make sense, get the best value for those contracts. We've had issues working real close, getting a closer relationship with our marketing folks to say, okay, why do we do what we're doing? In some cases, it might be why we're planning something on a substation, and marketing will say, well, that's not a high valued substation. Why are you spending it there versus others? We've had our finance folks engaged to say, okay, the world has changed. We don't necessarily have to be competitive in today's market, the funds to do certain projects. Does it make sense to do them now? I mean, it turned things over to get us out of our comfort zone, to relook at things, reevaluate things, realizing that we're spending that member at the end of the line's money. And it's important for us, because we are your employees, that we want to do the best thing at the end of the day for that member at the end of the line.
Boy, you can't have a better focus than that, and we thank you for that. Doesn't sound like boredom's one of the challenges that you have going on in Basin these days. Dale, your area probably saw the greatest reduction for us with a full 30%, I believe, if I remember things right. Could you share how you've dealt with that?
So I think you mentioned earlier the employees are excited about change. I don't think I heard anybody say that. But the thing that hasn't changed, and you've heard it throughout this meeting, is we have a great group of people, a lot of talent, really well trained. They know what they're doing, and they really are dedicated to the success of DGC. And I can't be more proud on a daily basis on that. But to break it down by group, in our operations group, we had the smallest change. There was a reduction in force there, but relatively small change. So we can maintain basically the same focus on good, safe operation that we've always had. On the maintenance side, they had a more substantial reduction. And so we're learning a new normal. We have to change the way we do business there. We have to rethink, like John said, things that you would have just naturally jumped into, you have to rethink it a little bit. And so for us, an example of that is we'll prioritize work that would be in the ammonia plant or the fertilizer plants over the work that might happen in the gas bath, because there's a better margin on the fertilizer side. So not that we can't get to that gas path later, but we'll do that later and hit the fertilizers harder. We're having to bring in more contractors, especially when we have those big jobs. We've got some very talented maintenance folks, but when there's a lot of activity, a turnaround, you have to bring in help. And then finally on the engineering side, we eliminated our engineering department. We disseminated some of the engineers into maintenance and operations. But we're, as Gavin said earlier, we're leaning on his group to help a little bit more with those bigger projects, the design projects. And dotted throughout today, you've heard where their folks have come in and helped us on that refrigeration turbine project I mentioned earlier. Gavin's folks were out there 24/7 monitoring that project. And I think John touched on it a bit, but if you're reliant on those contractors to do work for you, you want to make sure that the materials are in front of them. They have good instructions. They know what they need to do, and they're being held accountable to a work product, to both quality, quantity. John Klein's staff, the procurement and purchasing folks, making sure those materials are there when they're ready to work, making sure that we're not having those change orders that cost a lot of money. And so, with all of these things working to our benefit, we're making it work. And again, it's the new normal. And it's showing up on our bottom line like Steve showed today.
Thank you. Gavin, with all the collaboration that you've had to do, and that both of you have mentioned the expansion of that, how do you go about all the communication and prioritization that takes within your group to get the full needs covered? Well,
the answer is almost in the question, Doug. It's just constant communication, whether it's between the management level folks at headquarters and the plants, or whether it's the engineer talking with operations and maintenance at the facilities. Always making sure that everybody's focused on the same thing so that we maximize the efficiency of the work that we do. We're not making decisions twice or making another decision and changing our mind. Always be talking to each other. And the prioritization thing is more important now perhaps than ever. We recognize with the staff reductions that we've had that there's going to be things that have to wait. I mean, we just can't get it all done like we used to. And so we want to make sure that we're talking with everybody, with the plant management, okay, what absolutely has to get done, that's what we're going to do now. These are the things, they're very important too, but they're going to have to wait. And so we meet with the plants periodically, and like I said, the staff are always talking to each other just to make sure that nothing critical falls through the cracks.
Great, thank you very much. We've talked about the past. Just got a couple more questions to have them address, and then we'll open up the floor to mics for questions. But we talked about what's going on currently, and Pat, take a little look of what you think is coming in the next year, and just each of you individually kind of go through just perceptions and thoughts you may have in that regard.
From the Basin Ops side, big challenge we've got, and it's been a good thing. We've been prioritizing our work, like Gavin said. We've been collaborative and bringing everybody in. A great example of that is that we've got an aging infrastructure, and we're operating in a total different way that we did before. So the decisions we make now are going to be felt and reverberate into the future. So we need to do the right things. So in this collaborative effort, case in point, I'll point to our aging substations and transmission lines. We put a group together, and we could see that we were coming in every so often to the board of directors asking for money for a certain project. And they asked the right questions. Don't get me wrong, ask the right questions. Is this the appropriate thing to do? And we would answer those. But we felt in the environment we're in today, we need to do a little bit more. So what we've done is, in a longer detail with our substation and transmission work, detailed a 10 to 15 year plan of what we perceive from being the operator and maintenance of that facility to say, we've got this aging infrastructure, this is what we would do if it was totally up to us. And because of the larger plan, we'd get Gavin and his group involved to say, okay, help us with the engineering. We would go to marketing and say, okay, do you really see a priority on this substation? We as operators, maybe there's an older piece of equipment there, but that isn't where the hot spot should be. It's not where we should be spending our time. And we get our finance folks involved to say, okay, do we have the money to do this, to run through your budget so that at the end of the day we're making the right decisions? And that's really driven into us by Paul to say, are we doing the right decisions for the members and ultimately us as the consumer and the man at the end of the line? You move that into then other decisions, as the planning that we've got is running a fleet in a totally different way. I mean, if you asked me 10 years ago about cycling a coal plant, I'd say you're nuts. Is it the right thing to do? I still have a hard time with it. You can tell it's not the way you need to do it. But if our plan is to go from Paul's level, the board's level, all the way down to the employees, say that what we really want to do is produce the cheapest electricity we can for our consumer, but we want to be in the market with that coal plant 10 years from now, 15 years from now, and how do we do it? And how do we make those decisions that everybody can live with and move forward knowing that we're making the right decision?
What a challenge to be, make them run when we can make money on them and not make them run when we're losing money from even our incremental costs. So thank you for all that work. John, on your side, the challenges and upcoming year that you look at.
So short term and really through the life of the plant, our biggest hurdle is commodity pricing. Natural gas prices still drive the bus for us, but there's 13 products out there. So we're constantly working, and you'll hear a little bit more from the marketing guys later, working on trying to maximize the revenue and finding new ways to sell the product, new customers. They'll talk a little bit about N7 and the fertilizers, making sure that we're getting the best value out of those fertilizers, shortest shipping distances, all those sorts of things. And so make the most money that we possibly can, even look at switching products if need be. So an effort with the marketing group, and they're a great group to work with. Longer term, like I said, we have 13 products. I think there's potential for more. Paul mentioned earlier that we don't currently sell all of our CO2. We think there's an opportunity there. We don't sell all of our naphtha right now. There again, it's a higher value product than natural gas, so we certainly want to look for more customers there. We've started talking about recovering rare gases from our oxygen plant. And so I think there's new products, there's new opportunities, and some of those are substantial income streams. So I'm excited about the future.
Thank you. Gavin?
Yeah, there's a few things, challenges coming up and activities that we'll be pretty busy with. John mentioned the aging infrastructure effort, and if you've listened to the news lately, you read about how important the national power grid is. I think Basin is really setting a good example on that effort. The renewable that we see in the area continues to put pressure on just the infrastructure and the need for interconnection to the transmission system. So our folks are continually working through the SPP process and the wind farms and whatnot to design and construct interconnection points in the transmission system. So that, I think, will continue to be an effort. You'll hear a little bit in the next panel, and Paul alluded to it earlier, is the load growth in the Bakken. That has initiated a need to explore possible new generation. So there's a team that we've put together to look into that already. There could be a new plant up at Lonesome Creek. There could be a large gas-fired generation plant north of Lake Sakakawea. So that's a really big effort that we'd be challenged with. But there's a lot of challenges with the reduction in force that we've all mentioned before. But I think back to the year 2013, and if you remember at that time, there was a then record of retirees at Basin Electric, and there was a lot of worry about all the expertise that was walking out the door. And I remember worrying a little bit about it, but then I also remember thinking, you know what, we got good people that are still here, and if we need some more expertise, we'll get it. We have a good base here. And I feel the exact same way today. I feel very confident that the people that we have left after the reduction in force are good people, they're smart people, and that we're going to rise to any challenge that we face.
Thank you. My last question is maybe not a fair one, but I'm not always fair. My question is, you spoke of so many things that you're doing, the changes you're making to keep affordability for all of us. Are there any things other than showing our appreciation, paying our power bill, that we as members can do to better support your efforts on our behalf?
Well, I think it sums up, I'll call it we talk a lot about perception being reality. And if nothing else, if you walk away today knowing that we're doing everything we can with the good direction of the board of directors and Paul to cut corners wherever we can that make sense, not cut corners just to cut corners, that we're making the right decisions. The ask of us is to help us make the not only the perception reality, but the reality that we're doing that, the perception of everybody that you guys come in contact with. Because at the end of the day, we all want to be successful. We want to be able to do what we do for you and that member at the end of the line, and that's really why we're here. And I think that's, the employees want to do what's right, and if we see that we have your encouragement, we have your backing, that says volumes, and that's what I would ask.
Thank you. Great answer. Anything to add on?
You hit it on the head.
You do that a lot. So we're going to open it up and questions from the floor. We do have, we made sure that we got through these in plenty of time. There's microphones in the middle. If you raise your hand, somebody will come running with a microphone or walking quickly because that'd be safer. Any questions from the floor? Nobody wants to go overtime on this, do they? Last chance? Oh, the question back here. Straight back. Straight back. Greg, straight back. Oh, while Greg gets a mic, you can formulate your question entirely because you've got adequate time. I didn't give him a heads up on this soon enough, sorry. Can you come up to one of the mics? The first one, there's one right in front of the cameras here. The wireless ones are all distributed out to different places, is my understanding.
You had to wait, this ought to be good. I am a farmer in southwestern North Dakota, and I'm sure it's a fertilizer plant question, really. With all the difficulties this year in agriculture, fall work hasn't been done. Anhydrous, urea, that's normally applied in the fall, that hasn't taken place. Can you plan for that, or are you anticipating problems in the spring as a result of that?
I think that you're exactly right. There's been a lot of challenges with the customers being able to apply the product, and I think we've got a pretty good plan in place. They're going to talk a little bit more in the marketing section with the N7 and our relationship with OCI and the fertilizer plant in Iowa. That gives us some opportunity to look at the market region a little bit different. We are going into this fall with really as much anhydrous as I've ever seen in the fall. So that's definitely a concern. We're very fortunate we have a urea plant that consumes ammonia. So we'll really focus our efforts on making as much anhydrous as much urea as possible, convert your anhydrous to urea. And so we will have a relatively small amount of net ammonia production going into the spring. In the meantime, our marketing folks will look at shipping ammonia a little bit more out of the region than what we would have normally seen. They may have to discount prices a bit as well, but again, I think the N7 folks, I think they've got a good plan for us. I think we'll be postured pretty well for spring.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Great job, guys. And I think we're off the hook now. Join me in thanking them.